All right, now I'd like to move on to Keith Stamper. If you remember, Keith was doing his combine for us last week, and tonight I think he's going to finish up the body of it. Keith, welcome.
Okay, so this will be the second part of my little presentation. As some of you may have seen last week, I talked about building a combine, scratch building a combine, which was part of the car program for the NMRA achievement program. And I had to scratch build 4 cars. So I scratch built some high side gondolas. I'm a narrow gauge modeler, and I also scratch built this combine. Well, to start off with, this combine there weren't any plans for it. I know it exists. I've seen it on display out in a place in Colorado called Central City. It's sitting outside a casino. And a gentleman produced a rudimentary set of drawings for it in the Narrow Gauge Gazette many years ago. His name was Harry Brunk. And that is the only plan, to my knowledge, that I know about. So let's see if we can get this thing to play now. It's making click, click when I click on it. Well, there we go. All righty. So this was the only drawing I really had to work from. And unfortunately, when I started taking some dimensions from it and measuring things, I found there were some discrepancies. So I had to use a little bit of modeler's license. So to build my body, what I did is I got some styrene car siding, and I placed the pieces together and formed the sides. And the way I did that, I was able to, using this drawing, and a pair of dividers, I was able to measure out these distances. And also I had a photograph of the car that I'd taken myself that I was able to use. So here you see the basic body under construction. I started cutting the windows. I enlarged them eventually to take the Grant Line window castings that I'd purchased. I decided to use a commercial baggage door, which I should not have done. I should have scratch built it, and I regret that. But so here you see the basic body under construction. I use metal blocks called 123 blocks. They're can be bought off Amazon. They're engineering type blocks that people use in machine shops, and they're handy for weighting things down. The ends of the car are also scratch built, but the doors that I had were a little too short. So what I did is I modified them. I made them a little longer. And here you see the baggage car door that I had purchased. It's a Grant Line product. And these round sections on the corners here, I actually made these from black tubing to form the rounded part, because I wanted to do as much scratch building on this as possible. Here you see the body with the primer on it. And I realized that the steps that I had and that were on this particular car were actually much wider. So what I did is I took the Grant Line step ends and I modified them by making my own risers and treads. Here you can see the end of the car. If you look, you can see a little crack or a seam there in the door where I've made the door a little taller. I cleaned this up with a file, of course, afterwards, and got it all looking a lot more presentable. Inside the car, there was a partition door, or wall, I should say, that separated the passenger part from the baggage part. And I scratch built that along with that door that you see there. It's double-sided, that door, and is glazed with styrene material, 10,000 styrene. On the end of the car, there was a platform overhang, and I opted to make this from brass. I've done a lot of work in brass. I've scratch built a brass locomotive, and I'm pretty adept at soldering and working with resistance tools and such. So what I did is I built the end of the car, the top part, in brass, because I first had it in, I made it up out of styrene, and it was very, very fragile. So I elected to change that, and then I put my letterboard on and ran it right over the end of the brass and shaped it to fit over the car, fit over the brass portion. Here you see the end of the car with the end railing in place. I cheated here, and I didn't really cheat, but I went and bought an end casting from Precision Scale, which I used. But everything else you see there is basically scratch built stuff. Inside the car, I decided to do a wood floor. I cut and fitted boards, individual boards, and then I stained them using our friend Hunter Line stains. And that's the interior of the car with the floor stained. The photograph makes the wall in the center look crooked, but it's not. I measured it. Underneath the car, I had to scratch build some steps, some stirrup steps, and also all the brake detailing. So again, the NMRA conditions are that you can purchase certain components such as brake rigging in trucks, etc. But to connect the truss rods, there was an interesting component on the car. It had a plate with a ring on it. I think you can see my pointer. And what I did is I took a brass washer and I soldered it onto a plate, and then I bent the plate at an angle so that I could bring the truss rod up and through. On the prototype, there was actually a thread on here and it had a nut. Here you see the completed underbody of the car. I had begun painting it as well. I used Floquil colors on this, mud and Depot Buff and that sort of yellowish color to give that dusty, dirty look. The cars in Colorado have that sort of a yellowish tinge to the underside of them. They're not dark brown. Most of them are kind of a muddy yellow color. All these clevises and brake components, as you can see, the chains between the live levers and the fulcrum levers. I scratch built all these parts, and then I used commercial clevises. I made up the rods myself, of course, and then also these hanger irons or carrier irons. I scratch built those as well. The trucks are commercial trucks. They're made by a company called San Juan Engineering. These are, as I said, I model in ON3, not ON30. So this is a 3-foot gauge car. On the roof of the car, there was an interesting vent from the stove, and what it did, it could rotate. And as the car, or as the breeze caught it, it would rotate the vent in different directions. So what I did is I took some brass tubing and I cut and folded it, and then I made a vane to fit on the top of it, which resembles what the prototype had. Also in this photograph, you can now see the roof. I've got the tar paper on it. I used tissue paper and I painted it on with Floquil black paint. Inside the car, there was a toilet, and I decided to build the toilet and model the toilet paper as well. So the interior of my car has this little toilet in the one corner, which they refer to as a hopper. And to make this toilet roll, what I did is I took a piece of styrene tubing and I cut it to length, and then I glued a piece of styrene onto it and wrapped it around and let it drape down, 10 thou white styrene. For the bracket, I just simply took a piece of brass and brass wire, 40 thou brass wire. I flattened the one end and then I bent it at a 90-degree angle and put a curve in it. Pretty simple. And here in this picture, which is not very good because I've got green masking tape over the windows when I was painting the car, you can see the toilet and you can see the little toilet roll in there. Also in this car, there was a stove, and that's what that vane or vent was that I just talked about. And in the opposite end was a water cooler. And last year when I was down at Harrisburg at the show, not this year, last year, there was a guy selling these milk churns or milk cans. And I bought them, and when I got them home, I realized, wow, these things are way too big. So I decided to make a water cooler out of one of them. Here you see it in, I got a wooden crate, which forms the base for it, which looks like a box. And then I fashioned a spigot. I drilled a hole into it and ACC'd a piece of brass in, and I soldered on a stem and a handle. So I've got my little water cooler in there. There you can see it in the car there. The interior of the car I painted with Floqual polyester paints, like a muddy color. I mixed some colors together. I used Floqual Depot and polyester and mud as well. You can see the detail on the end of the car. Again, the actual end sill was a commercial part that I had, and then I obviously made all the brackets and handles, and I also scratch built the fitment for the brake wheel. The decals were an interesting experience, and I hope you're all sitting down. They cost me over $100. It was insane. I bought some decals from one of the model companies, and they were way out of scale. They were way too big. They looked terrible. The car looked like a toy. So I got in touch with a guy out in the West, and he custom made these decals for me to my photographs, and they are an exact match for the prototype. For seats, I bought Grant Line castings, and then I cut them and fitted them. I had to make some of the seats on the right-hand side of the car wider, and some of the seats on the left-hand side of the car a little narrower, because it had single and double seats. And then I put some figures in there. There's one big guy sitting in the front there. So there you see the car finished. I made fashioned some blinds for it. I also fogged up the toilet window there, and then you can see that little vent on the roof that I made. And there it is running on my layout. I live down in Port Colborne, Ontario, and I have a home layout, and I run it as part of my operations. I use JMRI Operations Pro, and we have operating sessions here. So anyway, that's my passenger train, and that's it. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you found it interesting.
I thought it was fantastic. And I'd like to say, too, that Keith is coming back later this year, first part of next year, and talk to us about vacuum forming. I've had several of you say that you'd like to see how to do that, but you've never tried that yourself. And Keith has agreed to come back and show us how he does it and try to help us learn. So Keith, thanks so much for doing that. Beautiful work, and congratulations on getting a car certificate.
My pleasure. Thank you very much. Hope you enjoyed it. Anybody got any questions?
Actually, Keith, I do. This is Alan.
Hi, Alan.
You had to put a lot of work into the seats inside the car. Would it be a good thing if there were some 3D prints available for seats like that?
I would have loved to have had 3D prints for seats like that. I struggled. Actually, I redid those seats 3 times because I screwed them up.
Wow.
I was most disappointed. I got a confession too. The roof that I built for the car was not the first one. I made a couple of attempts until I got it right. I wanted it to look right. The first one, I'm going to scratch build a bus now, what they call a Mack rail bus. I'm working on my locomotive certificate now, and do you guys know what a Garrett locomotive is?
Yes.
It's an articulated locomotive. I'm South African, and I grew up around Garrett locomotives. My dad worked on the railway, and I'm going to scratch. I have built a Garrett kit from a company called Backwoods Miniatures, and it came as an ON30 model, and I split the frame and modified it to be ON3 so I can run it on my layout. And it's my backstory is that it was a demonstrator that they brought to North America for the narrow gauge locomotives to test when they were looking to buy articulators. So that's how I'm going to justify having a Garrett on my layout. My current project is a Rio Grande Southern brass galloping goose, which I just painted it and started decaling it today. That'll be my rail bus, my Garrett, and my galloping goose will be my 3 locomotives for my certificate.
Yeah, come back and show it to us when you get it done.
Oh, the Garrett's that's built. I'm test running it on my layout. I just haven't painted it yet.
Oh,
but I've been test running it. It's dead rail as well. I have the battery and everything in the front tender and the anyway, I won't bore you with it right now. I know you want to move on with the program. So thanks for watching. Anybody else got any other questions? Nope. Okay. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Keith. I really do appreciate it. Looking forward to seeing you again.